Hey everyone, I'm Dane, and I'm very excited to share with you my approach to writing middle grade fiction. Massive shout out to Shelby and Teresa for inviting me to join the Writers Workout. I appreciate the opportunity. So before we jump in, a little bit about me. I started writing back in 2013, long time ago now. And I explored everything from picture books way up to adult fantasy, just trying to find my feet. That was primarily through the indie side of publishing. However, 2024, I managed to score the best agent in the business, Jenna Satterthwaite from Storm Lit. And right now, we currently have 2 middle grade stories of submission to editors. So we're very excited to see where they land. Now, if you don't write middle grade fantasy or fiction, don't worry. During this video, I'm going to cover off on a wide range of techniques and strategies that transcend genre or age range. So stick with it. I'm sure you'll find something which you can use. All right, let's dive into what this presentation will cover. Why I gravitate to middle grade fiction, key considerations for middle grade audiences, planning ahead, plotting mold drafting another book, generating story ideas, building unforgettable characters, structuring my story with Save the Cap, deepening the outline, draft 0 and 0.5, drafting, revising, and tools, and a conclusion. So why do I gravitate towards middle grade stories? Well, when I think back to every book that's ever shaped my childhood or even me as an adult, they're always middle grade stories. Everything from the Magic Faraway Tree to Goosebumps to Hatchet to Harry Potter. They all filled my childhood with a sense of wonder, which still sticks with me today. So by writing middle grade stories, it's my chance to pass on that wonder to the new generation of readers. I still remember reading Harry Potter for the first time and wishing it was me. To be invited to Hogwarts, to wander Diagon Alley, to stuff my face at Honeydukes, as I'm sure most children do. The experience showed me what great storytelling can do. It transports you somewhere else entirely, out of your normal, mundane life to something magical. If I can awaken even a fraction of that magic in young readers, then I know I've done something worthwhile. In the end, middle grade feels like a home. It suits my voice, my humour, my imagination, the stories that I want to tell. They shaped me as a kid, and still shape me today, and now I get to pay it forward. I'll quickly cover off on some of the core considerations when writing middle grade stories, but I'll keep it light. I want to focus a majority of this presentation on my writing tips and tricks, but anything I discuss here can be easily found online in greater detail. I always strive to make sure my narrator, whether it's first person or third person, sees the world through the lens of a kid. Sounds logical, right? It's actually pretty dang difficult, because it's so easy to slip into adult phrasing, adult logic, that it takes considerable effort, consistent effort, to make sure that every sentence, every thought, every description sounds like it belongs to a kid. Everything on my page needs to be so completely filtered through my main character that it's instantly clear who's telling the story, even if you pick a line at random. This is a voice equality you see so many agents and editors asking for, when the voice leaps off the page and feels completely alive. Humour plays a massive part in my books. I always try to include something funny as early as possible, preferably in the first paragraph. It really sets the tone and lets the reader know what to expect. But also, nothing creates interest like laughter. It'll buy you time to hook them with something else further down the track. It's like a candy trail leading them deeper into the story until your other plot elements have sucked their fingers into them too. If you can make them laugh, you can make them read. For middle grade readers are just starting to explore emotions like first crushes and attraction. This means they're curious, but they're not quite ready to carry a full-blown romantic storyline. Because of this, in my stories, I limit any romance to blushing, butterflies. If things get really crazy, maybe a little bit of hand-holding. Our story is based around dangerous mythical creatures, so there's no shortage of battles, but I'm always careful about how I write them. I don't rely on gore or violence in the same way that I would for an older audience, but I must always strive to keep the stakes real. Kids' imaginations are wild, so I try to leave space for them to fill in the drama themselves while keeping things safe enough for a younger reader to handle emotionally. That said, on the rare occasion I've included a harsher than usual scene, I've always tempered it with a softer language, humour, or pulling back just before things get too intense. My stories take place all over the world, and with each one I'm determined to create such an atmospheric setting that the reader's pulled in immediately. Everything from the sights, the smells, the taste, the works. Setting is one of my favourite tools, but it doesn't stop at describing a place. Every single scene has to happen in the most interesting location I can imagine, as long as it serves the story. I ask myself, what's the most unexpected, memorable, or magical spot this scene could happen? And if the answer is a kitchen or an office, then I've done something wrong. My goal is to make every scene feel alive, whether it's a haunted cubby in a dead forest, an abandoned lighthouse, or a mythical train station. I'll never settle for a bedroom when there's an unlocked ice cream van down the road. Finally, I always let the children solve the problem and save the day. They need to have the autonomy to make decisions, take risks, and to learn from their mistakes. Yeah, they can have adult mentors and allies, but they need to be the ones steering the ship. Don't rip them off by having an adult swoop in at the last second to fix everything and undercut the kids' agency. I want my readers to see themselves in the daring characters on the page. Now that we're aware of the key considerations when writing a middle grade story, here's my writing process that helps me keep a tight first draft, and it's all to do with planning. The planning phase is hands down the most important part of writing a novel for me, so I dedicate a lot of time to it. If there's one piece of advice that I really wish I'd embraced earlier, it's this. Start plotting your next book while you're still drafting your current one. I don't wait until I've typed the end before brainstorming my next idea. I let it simmer in the background. Doing this means I can take it slow, explore different angles, characters, plot twists, without the pressure of starting right away. It really is a game changer. When I finally do sit down to write, I'm not scrambling to slap together an outline in my eagerness to start. I've already spent weeks or even months thinking through the structure, the locations, the characters, the hooks that are going to drive the story forward. So, by the time I'm ready to draft, I've got a roadmap that I trust, so I can just focus on telling the story well. This slow simmering approach has saved me countless hours of structural edits down the line. Letting the story develop in the background while I'm working on something else gives it time to actually grow a heart, which means that when it comes time to write, it's got a rock solid foundation. Now, if you're a pantser, that's someone who doesn't plot whatsoever, I salute you, because you do something I can't fathom. It blows my mind. It's like you're working in dark magic or something. Well done. But for me, planning is the key to writing a good, successful, engaging story. This brings up the question of time. I'm lucky in that I don't have a lot of time commitments, so I have the flexibility to work on multiple projects. I know that's not the case for everyone. And for many, it might seem overwhelming to work on 2 or more projects at once, but I still urge you to give it a try. You don't have to be actively writing both. You just need to think. Use those quiet moments between sets at the gym or in the shower or while driving or even lying in bed at night. All those little pockets of time add up, and they're perfect for letting your next idea simmer. Plotting doesn't have to happen at your desk. It just has to happen in your brain. And when you train your brain to function like that, you'll be surprised how much groundwork you can lay without actually touching a keyboard. Once again, if there's one takeaway from this video that I hope sticks with you, it's this. Start plotting your next book while drafting your current one. This single habit really changed everything for me. It was massive. Story ideas can really come from anywhere, and it's different for every writer. Luckily, I never seem to run out. It's not one of the problems that I have. But it's important to note that not every idea is created equal. For me, any idea that I decide to pursue has to pull me in so completely. It has to be one of those ideas that you can't stop thinking about. You know, when you're laying in bed, when you're spending time with the family, when you're supposed to be working. It needs to really grip me away because I'm going to be spending months or even years working on this story. So every step of it needs to feel like an escape. Because the thing is, if I'm not excited to write it, no one's going to be excited to read it. So the idea is truly the key that holds everything together. For me, story ideas often start with location. I'm a traveller. I love everything about it. I love the cultures, the food, the way different places make you feel. I've travelled to 75 countries, many of them 2, 3, or even 4 times. So sometimes I'll write a book set in a place I've fallen in love with. Other times, I'll use story as an excuse to mentally travel somewhere I've always dreamed of being. Either way, I want my readers to feel like they've been somewhere unforgettable without ever leaving the couch. The world's a mysterious place for middle grade readers, so they're naturally curious to explore anywhere that feels different. By using location as a key element in my stories, I'm helping expand their horizons. I'm taking them to a bustling Greek fish market, a haunted Romanian castle, a cosy cottage in the British countryside, and in our travels, I hope I can spark even a small appreciation for different cultures along the way. The second major source of story ideas for me is mythology. I write fantasy books because is it even a book if there's no magic?
Over the line. You're so far past the line that you can't even see the line.
So myths and monsters, they really get me thinking. Everything from boggarts to redcaps, ghosts, sirens, whatever it is, I love them all. But the thing that really gets me excited is adding a what-if question to them. What if vampires and garden gnomes were locked in a secret war in Romania? What if all the magical creatures in England were ruled by corrupt and ruthless enforcers? What if a vengeful mermaid came ashore once a year to punish the town for overfishing? Once I've nailed those what-if questions, the fun part begins. Putting my own spin on the myths and the monsters. A vampire who dreams of becoming an influencer. A boggart with an obsession for human hair. Demigods whose powers are so weak that they're practically cursed. That balance of myth and absurdity is where the magic happens for me. Something old, something new, something ridiculous to keep the kids entertained. The third source of story ideas for me is trope. Some mornings I'll wake up and think, geez, it'll be fun to write a treasure hunt book in Barbados, or a murder mystery on a mythic train, a high-stakes heist in the back alleys of Cairo. Once I have that core concept, a genre or a structure I'm excited about, I start building around it. First, I brainstorm settings that might elevate the story, places that add atmosphere, mystery, or magic. Then I start layering in mythology to give it that extra spark. The result is a story that feels familiar but fresh, rooted in a classic idea but twisted through the lens of myth and humour and a middle grade voice. Some of you might be thinking, well, good for him, but I don't write fantasy. I've never left my hometown. And tropes, okay, I hear you, fair points. In that case, my go-to tip is really simple. Pinterest. Once your algorithm is dialed in, it's a goldmine. I can scroll for hours. The images pulling me into new moods, new worlds, weird little ideas that I never would have thought of on my own. Unlike the other socials where there's so much doom and gloom as the world burns around us, Pinterest is all visual. It really is a treasure trove of creativity at your fingertips. When your brain's stuck, a single image can spark the book you've been waiting to write. But use it with care because it is dangerously addictive. I now have way more ideas than I could ever write thanks to Pinterest. Okay, so I usually have a very vague, very loose idea of the direction I want my story to go. So once I'm at this stage, I'll usually jot down a single sentence high concept pitch. Something like, a magicless boy stumbles into a deadly tournament for demigods and must prove that there's power in being ordinary. There's not a whole lot of detail in that sentence, and that's really the point. It's mainly just to capture the heart of the story and keep me focused as I flesh it out. Even the best ideas fall flat without great characters, so let's check out the cast. Like with the idea generation phase, I'll always work on my characters before I start hard plotting. I'll begin with a few potential characters that I think may inhabit the world I want to create, and then I flesh them out, breathing life into them. For me, it's always very important to make each one feel unique in their appearance, their voice, their goals, just to make them all stand out as much as possible in the story. Kids love to read up, meaning they prefer stories where the main character is a little older than they are. That's why my protagonists are usually 12. But it's not just about assigning an age and calling it done. Everything about the character, from the way they think, speak, and act, has to feel authentic to that stage of life. Their understanding of the world should be fitting to their age, so too their emotional range. Middle grade readers are very, very smart. They can spot when dialogue sounds too adult or when the narration slips into a grown-up voice. Getting that balance right is so crucial. It's what makes them believe in the characters and stay invested throughout the whole story. I like to brainstorm a loose cast before I get too busy in the plotting of my book. By having these characters in place, it allows me to explore any potential storylines and to really, inhabit my world and to flesh it out. Once I know who's in the mix, whether that's mentors, allies, randoms, it doesn't matter. I can then start to connect them all together and find out all the fun ways I could have in making them clash, making them ruin each other's plans, and to really create, as much tension as possible by merging these characters. The key is making each of them as unique as possible, not only in their appearance, but in their goals, their fears, what's making them tick, what's standing in their way. Like earlier, where I wrote a high concept hook for the story idea, I do the same for every major character. For example, Bastion, a cursed demigod desperate to escape the illness that killed his father, enters a brutal tournament to win the divine nectar that could cure him before it's too late. That one sentence tells me his goals, the stakes, and the emotion driving him. When each character has a hook like that, it's easy to keep their arc strong and their role in the story clear. When it comes to personality, I always think in terms of group dynamics. Do I have a funny one, a serious one, a chaotic one? Because it's that interplay that keeps things fresh and provides all the tension needed to create an engaging story. If I can swap a line of dialogue between characters and it still fits, something's wrong. My goal is to always create a cast where each voice could be recognised even without dialogue tags. Once I have my cast sheet, it's time to get to the hard plotting, as I call it. And for this, I have got one golden recommendation. Save the Cat writes a novel by Jessica Brody. Save the Cat is hands down the greatest craft book I've ever found on writing. It breaks story structure into 15 beats across 3 acts in a way that's really clear and practical. If you've ever struggled with knowing what should happen next in your story, then this book will guide you through everything, step by step. It really helps my emotional highs hit so much harder. It builds the tension naturally, and it ensures the protagonist character arc is satisfying. Now, before we get into plotting, I need to raise a very important point. Adults are gatekeepers for children's books. Parents, librarians, teachers, aunts, uncles, they're the ones putting books on children's shelves. If they sense that your story might be inappropriate, it's likely to be passed over no matter how good it is. So you must always write with both the reader and the gatekeeper in mind. Alright, once I've read Save the Cat and I've plotted my story beats, hopefully made easier from my cast sheet, and from having considered the story for the weeks or months leading up to this point, I might be feeling pretty good about myself. Or I might be feeling like my brain's leaking out my nose. Either way, it's totally normal, it's part of the process, and it looks different for everyone. Whatever I'm feeling, this next part will always lift my spirits. It's deepening the outline. It's here where I'll go through and I'll break the Save the Cat beats into individual chapters. This is really just giving structure to the beats. For example, my chapter 1 might carry the opening image, the theme stated, and part of the setup. I'll go through the entire beat sheet this way and usually land somewhere around 30 to 35 chapters by the time I'm done. But every writer will handle this differently. When I plan in each chapter, I make sure every single one serves a purpose. It should move a plot forward, reveal something new about a character, or raise the stakes in an exciting way. But just as important is how the chapter ends, because that's the moment the reader decides whether to keep going. I want the readers to turn the page. That's pretty much the whole goal. So to do this, I like to end the chapter with what I call a symbol crash, which is a term I read years ago, and it's really stuck with me. It's basically a cliffhanger. R.L. Stine does this fantastically in his Goosebump books. His cliffhangers, they sort of range from genuine suspense through to what I'll call a cheaper fake out, such as someone screams, the chapter ends. Then at the start of the next chapter, I find out that it's only the wind. Or there's a knock on the door, chapter end. Then the start of the next chapter, oh, it's only Aunt May. Those moments work because they keep kids turning the pages eager for the next jump scare. But older middle grade readers are a little more savvy. They may grow to spot these cheaper, I don't like the word cheaper, but these other types of cliffhangers or symbol crashes, and they might grow to resent them. So because of this, every cliffhanger should feel earned. For this age group, a symbol crash might be a genuine twist, a big reveal, a burst of chaos, a problem that just got worse, or a decision that changes everything. Not every chapter needs to end on a cliffhanger, but every chapter must make the reader want to keep on going. To help me stay on track while working out what's in each chapter, I'll often jot down a note on the top of each page. What's the character's goal in the scene? What's the obstacle? And what's the symbol crash that'll hook the readers into the next chapter? That little check-in helps me make sure the story is still moving with purpose. This is a stage where the story starts to feel real. I'm no longer working with loose ends. I'm building the spine of the book. And once I have that, drafting becomes so much more fun. Excellent. I've got my plot sorted. I've broken it all into chapters. Now it's time to start layering in those scenes and fleshing out what I call Draft Zero. This is where I take the short paragraphs I wrote for Save the Cat and I build them into full scenes. I approach this visually by imagining a movie sort of playing in my head and jotting everything down as quickly as I can, including things like dialogue, action, interiority, and, it's messy. It's going to be messy, and that's okay, because more than polish, I want flow. Getting bogged down in details is a surefire way to invite pacing problems to my story, so don't waste half an hour finding the perfect descriptor or clever line. I'll keep the wheels turning. If something isn't flowing, I'll push through, leaving behind a rough placeholder that I'll fix later. The goal is to get the shape of the story down from start to finish without stalling. But at the end of Draft Zero, it's not unusual for every chapter to be around 1,000 words, maybe even more. It'll read like a real book, just super, super clunky. But it'll give me a good sense of the flow, the pacing, the character dynamics, without me having spent any time polishing sentences or making anything shine whatsoever. After Draft Zero comes Draft 0.5, and this is where I go all the way back to the start and work my way forward line by line at a faster pace, tackling those placeholders that are left before, really trying to enhance descriptions and spending a lot of time on the dialogue, really trying to make it sing and come alive. By the end of Draft 0.5, things still aren't perfect. This is still right before the first official draft, but it's a lot more cohesive than what it was before. Many people are going to call this step excessive, and many people are 100% correct. But for me, it's what keeps revisions from becoming overwhelming later on. If I've ironed out most of the big picture stuff early, really tightened everything and stopped any sort of plot holes from happening, the draft one becomes less about fixing structure and more about refining voice and just adding sparkle. Now, many of us have been there before where we've had to tear apart a polished manuscript because a plot hole has popped up or something's just not working. And you know what? It really sucks. Killing your darlings, it's terrible, right? So I'd rather fix everything before I get to that stage. By investing this time now in getting everything as perfect as it can be before the polishing starts. I've done it. I've arrived. I'm finally about to do what authors are supposed to do, and that is write my novel. This is where all that unseen planning falls into place, and it's time to actually begin draft one. This is where I'll pour the biggest mug of coffee I can find. I'll stretch my fingers, get comfortable, and jump straight in. Because, thanks to our earlier drafts, there's no writer's block. There's no staring at a blank screen. It is ready to go. As mentioned at the start of the presentation, I'm always working on more than my story. But when I'm working on draft one of a book, it takes priority. So my peak creativity times are from 6 a.m. to lunch. I know that. So I'll only ever work on this book during those times. All the other projects, they get shuffled around later on in the day. But this takes precedence, always. Thanks to the level of detail I've put into the earlier draft 0 and 0.5, I can usually churn through this stage relatively quickly. My most recent middle grade book, which I completed at 54,000 words, or the first draft anyway, I wrote the full first draft in 16 days. And I even kept live updates on Twitter, which was a fun little experiment to do and really kept me motivated throughout the process. After completing the official first draft, it's time to jump back to the beginning again and go through and polish, refining everything as much as you can, take as much time as you need. And draft 2 for me, it often takes maybe twice as long as draft 1 because I spent so much time trying to get everything as perfect as it can be. So what programs do I use when I'm writing? Scrivener primarily is my go-to when starting a new story. If you're not familiar with Scrivener, it's a writing program designed specifically for authors. I use it for all my early stage work, so beat sheets, character profiles, location notes, and drafting. And what makes it so great is how easy it is to organize the whole story world. I can lay out chapters clearly, I can drag and drop scenes to reshuffle structure, and keep all of my notes, so your character arcs, your beat sheets, any of your world building, all in one place, and it's so easy to find. It's perfect for tracking a big, twisty middle grade story. After I finished the second draft, I switched from Scrivener to Microsoft Word, and there's two primary reasons for this. If you've been staring at your manuscript in one program for such a long time, whether it's months or years, you start to become blind to your own writing. Everything, starts to gloss over. So by switching to a new program and having a different font and a different layout, it helps you to pick up on some of the awkward writing that you may have just become immune to. The other reason I switched to Microsoft Word is because it's got a really good read aloud function. Hearing my work read out loud helps to catch many issues such as stilted dialogue, poor rhythm, any missed words. So it's really, really great, and it's key for me in the later drafts. Now, it's common advice to read your own manuscript out loud to help catch these things, which is great advice. But when someone else or something else, such as Microsoft Word, reads it aloud for you, it frees you up to focus entirely on the sound of the writing, not the mechanics of reading itself. Once I finish my third draft, I'll always let my manuscript rest for at least a month. Longer if you can do it, although oftentimes my eagerness to finish the story and to get it out there to my agent, it comes in and really starts poking me until, I want to scream because I want to jump back in. I love my work. I love doing what I do. But by letting it rest for at least a month, it gives your mind time to sort of reset a little bit, so that when you come back into it, it's so much more easy to spot what's working in the story, but more importantly, what isn't. I wouldn't recommend leaving the book for any less than 1 month. A week just isn't enough distance. The story is still too fresh in your mind, and you'll read what you meant to write instead of what actually is on the page. So force yourself to take that break, to step back. Maybe go work on a different book, which is what I'll always do. When you come back, your story is always going to be there, and likely with a few surprises hidden in plain sight. And there we have it. After all that time brainstorming and planning and plotting, we have our nearly polished middle grade books. For me, the hardest part has always been knowing when the manuscript is truly ready. I'm always so excited to send my book to Jenna, my agent, or to go on the submission process. So it takes a lot of knowledge and effort to actually rein that back in and to not rush that editing process. Sometimes that means having to do another round of revisions because a previous draft just didn't land right. And yeah, that can be tough, having to spend an extra month or more on this manuscript when you're jumping up and down and you want to get it out into the world. But it's worth not rushing this because that final bit of polish can really make all the difference. That's the hardest part, I think, is having the patience to get it right. But after all the time and care we've poured in, this round is never wasted. Every step of the process has been brought in towards something more than just a finished book. You're creating a story that's going to find its way into the hands of a young reader who may very well need it. And that, to me, is worth every draft. And that's it. I hope this presentation has been helpful as you take the next step in your author journey. More than anything, I hope you've gained a few new tools that will help you write novels that stick with children long after they've grown up, and that maybe one day they'll pass on to children of their own. So take your time, let ideas simmer, don't rush the process, but most of all, really try to enjoy yourself. That's very important. Thanks so much for watching. I can't wait to see what middle grade stories you unleash into the world. Good luck.